Weekend, Governor Greg Abbott's main priority this session will become law. He's set to sign legislation on Saturday that will start offering private school subsidies to Texas families. However, his sights appear to be set next on a few other major items.
The governor posted a picture of him meeting on Wednesday with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and House Speaker Dustin Burrows. He said the three discussed how to get bail reform, property tax relief, and education funding across the finish line with time running short. Today, we want to bring in some experts to talk through what we've seen at the Capitol the last few weeks. Two former state lawmakers who join us every Thursday. Thanks to both of you for being back. Dennis Bonnen, former Speaker of the House who represented Southeast Texas, and then Mark Strama, previously served as a Democratic representative for the Austin area. So you two, this is the time of year where things start to get a little hectic, or at least that's how it feels here in the newsroom. And I'm sure as you're walking through the halls of the Capitol, Friday will mark 1 month until the end of the legislative session. We want to remind our audience. So we've started to see that flurry of activity of both chambers, really. So talk to us about this crunch time. What does that indicate for you all? How are lawmakers feeling about a bit of that rush?
They're tired. They're tired, they're anxious, they're concerned. And it's a almost hour-to-hour roller coaster because, 1 hour a bill, gets set for a hearing in a committee and you're like, I'm getting there. And then, another committee announces and your bill isn't set for a hearing, in a different committee. Calendars announces, Tuesday's calendar on the House floor, your bill's on it. And then they, announce Wednesdays, you're not on it. So, I mean, you're in this constant flux of trying to push bills forward. We're reaching a point where if your bill's not out of a House committee, you're in trouble. We're not quite there. Next week is the point where it gets pretty hard to get a bill past to the governor's desk if you aren't out of a House committee. The Senate's a little different, as the Senate has proven by being very fast in their process on the beginning of the session. They're also able to be fast throughout. So I mean, in the Senate, there's always life and a legislative opportunity really until the very end. I mean, there are some procedural requirements there, but they really aren't as significant as the Houses are. So the Senate certainly is frantic and working hard and producing a lot of positive things, but they're in less of a dire scenario as the House will work itself into through the timeline.
I mean, just to illustrate the point about the Senate having less procedural obstacles, they literally have one less committee you have to get through. So when you pass your preliminary committee hearing in the Senate, you can put your bill on the intent calendar for the Senate floor, and then it's up to the Lieutenant Governor to recognize you. In the House, you go from committee to the calendars committee to the House floor, and that can be a real lengthy process. I would say a couple of things to add to Dennis's point. One, this is where we always are at this point in the session. This is pretty typical. Except what's atypical is how early the Senate passed its priority bills, and that's just a byproduct of having a lieutenant governor who's been there a long time and came with an agenda. The second thing I'd say is about 8,000 bills get filed each session. About 1,200 of them passed last session. We're pacing to be about the same this session. At the end of the day, it's about a 15% hit rate when you file a bill. And it's a vastly different experience when you file a bill that's a priority bill, one of the bills that people talk about, versus the other 1,000 bills that pass, the other 7,000 bills that are filed that no one ever talks about.
But I think that something that you all, both of you, have talked about previously with us is that sometimes a bill may not make it through committee, but it could be attached as an amendment to some other legislation. Can you talk about the inside of that too?
No, absolutely. So right now, good legislators are working really hard, their staffs really more than anything, to find that bill that the bill they may have filed, or they may not even filed a bill, that they could put onto another bill as an amendment, as you point out. So I mean, there's some legislators that we've mentioned before who've passed entire legislative packages as amendments and passed very, very few bills with their name on them. And so right now that's another component. And it's actually a component that's very challenging because you have that House calendar. So you go to the floor and you say, all right, here are the bills I need to be prepared to make votes on today. But what you don't have a calendar of is Mark showing up with amendment to one of these bills that I have no idea is coming.
Which was the only way I ever passed anything because I was in the minority the whole time I was in the legislature. And my best chance of passing a bill was hitching a ride on a bill that the governor wasn't going to veto.
So you're familiar with that process
very
very
it's
closely.
The right way to do it. I mean, there are rules. You have to be germane to the bill. You can't violate the two subject rule. But and it helps if you have had a committee hearing on the bill, on your own standalone bill, so that you can go and represent to the members on the floor, this bill was thoroughly heard, it had the support of the committee, but sometimes you just get stuck in calendars when you're a member of the minority, you just have you just don't have as much influence to break the logjam.
Yes, and that helps, but also it hits a point where people go, well, I'm going to have an amendment later, so I don't care whether his was heard in committee or not. I'm for him, he's for me. Well, it's
There's that. I mean, look, yeah, absolutely. We're also at the point where it's about trust and reciprocity and goodwill.
Something too, I think, for our viewers who maybe don't spend a lot of time following it, be aware of those amendments. Be listening in to some of that debate, even if it doesn't have a bill number attached to it. I do want to note, we mentioned some of the governor's top priorities, for example, property tax relief, but the last week we've really seen state lawmakers spend a lot of time on social, or what many refer to as culture war issues. One that got a lot of attention this week, of course, the House could soon vote on requiring public schools to display the 10 Commandments. So we want to spend a little time with that proposal there. Any reactions, the likelihood that this could move forward?
It looks like the House is moving it forward. I mean, it appears that the House has full intentions of passing that bill. I would assume the Senate will probably do the same. And so I think the House is moving in the direction of passing the bill to require the 10 Commandments in schools. And so I think, the reality of it is, what you find is that, just being very candid, every session conservative lawmakers have to find something more to say they did. And so you keep going down that line. And a good example is abortion. I mean, they've all but outlawed abortion here in Texas. Mark probably doesn't like that. I'm fine with that. But if you want to be a great pro-life legislator, what is there to pass if you've effectually ended the process of having an abortion? So what you're seeing is that with 20 years of a conservative Republican leadership in the state of Texas, you whittle down those cultural issues to pass from a conservative perspective, because most have been done.
Which is why we're getting into the area of stupid, right? Like, this 10 Commandments bill just doesn't belong on the House floor. This is a bad idea. It clearly violates the founding principles of this country. The government shouldn't be practicing or establishing a religion or giving preference to any religion. But Dennis is right. They've got to find something new to feed red meat to the base. That goes back to something we've talked about repeatedly. All of these politicians are accountable in their primaries. They're not accountable in their general elections because of gerrymandering. And because of that, we keep getting pulled further and further toward the extremes. The one other point I'd make on this topic, because you mentioned abortion, we should also take note when something good happens. And there was a bipartisan bill to address the worst problem with the abortion ban, which is women who have died in the parking lot of the emergency room because the doctors didn't think that they were allowed legally to save their lives. So there was a bipartisan consensus on a bill that cleans up the language so that doctors have some clarity about when they can intervene when a woman is in the act of miscarrying and it threatens her life. That said, the bill didn't make exceptions to the abortion ban for women who are victims of rape and incest. It didn't open the door, and there is contemporaneously legislation moving through the Senate to ban the use of transmission by mail of mifepristone to women who want to take their lives into their own hands.
Well, and on that point, I want to be clear. Senator Hughes just passed that bill in the Senate that Mark's referring to. Most of that bill is just clarifying, to Mark's point, the extremes, meaning a lot of these tragedies or tragic situations that have been used as examples were never against the law. It was the propaganda and the hysteria that people wanted to drive against having passed a ban, and saying, oh, you can't do this. No, they could. And so even Senator Hughes, who passed the bill, has said, I'm really just clarifying the bad information that those on the other side have put out there. There's very little here that's actually changing what is or is not law today.
And of course, we'll have to see whether the Texas House takes that up and approves it and sends it to the governor's desk. But for now, we'll wrap up our conversation and revisit all of this next week on another conversation about what's happening in the session. So Dennis and Mark, thank you both for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we'll send you to break and we'll be back after this.